everybody? It is currently Thursday, October 2nd, 2025, and I'm coming at you live from the Teatro de Pompey. There's a Senate meeting going on. There's a bit of tension in the air, but I think everything's going to go over well. All right. that and that will it's a little foreshadowing because that will be the set of our of what we're talking about in this episode. This episode is about the assassination of Julius Caesar. I've been trying not to do so many war episodes lately just cuz I've been talking about it so much. I literally had to Google what are the most obscure wars in the world because I talked about so many different wars that I was like, we got to slow down the war stuff. And this one's not really a war episode. I guess maybe slightly tangentially related to it. There's one little war in it, but I mean, if you're talking about the Roman Empire, or I guess at this point the Roman Republic, then you got to talk about war a little bit. That's how you make an empire. You make an empire through war. It's the only way to do it. But I haven't been doing episodes about it as much because I'm like, I don't know if people just want to continue to hear me talking about political issues and then the war, because that's basically the setup for all of these things. It's like this guy disagreed with this guy, then they started some, militia group, and one was backed by the Soviets and one was backed by the Chinese or whatever, and then they fought each other. It usually goes something like that. So I don't want to talk about war too much, but I got to get my fix in somewhere. You know what I mean? If I can't read it from a Wikipedia article, I got to watch it happening. And today I watched a documentary on YouTube about these Kurdish rebels, I guess. I don't think you can exactly call them rebels because they're fighting ISIS, which is another rebel type group. So I guess they're both rebels, actually, because the Kurds, they hate the countries that they live in. They want to have their own country going on. So yeah, I guess they're both rebels. But so the Kurds they're not as religiously conservative and fundamental as, ISIS and these Islamist groups. But they're still very conservative people. They're from the fucking Middle East. They're not living, you know what I mean, in some Western liberal utopia. They're from the mountains of the Middle East. And so these militant groups, they're I guess communist backed, right? Because the militant groups are Marxist. And so I'm assuming they're communist backed groups, and a big part of the foundation of a powerful communist revolution is having women on your side, right? In China, that was a big thing they did. It was something that Mao was very good at. The USSR kind of did a similar thing, but that is a country that's kind of harder to do it in because they have one big cohesive religion, whereas in China, I think it was a little bit more splintered. But it's a big part of having a Marxist revolution, or I guess Leninist. I think Leninist is when you get all the women on your side. I think maybe. But so that's what these Kurdish groups are doing, and obviously these Kurdish dudes are super conservative. They're Christian, but they're Orthodox Christian. They are Zoroastrian, which I don't know anything about that one, but it's 10,000 years old, so I'm guessing they don't have the most egalitarian view when it comes to women. And they're also Muslim. So those are the three, and they're all pretty strongly that, not super strongly, they do value kind of their culture over their religion, right? Tajikistan is a majority Muslim country. Most countries that have a large Muslim population, it's 99% Muslim. So but they value their religion so much that they value their culture so much that they still drink vodka and all that stuff, and they banned the hijab. I think maybe for women under a certain age, but maybe for all women. So, and that's kind of what these Kurds are like. But like I said, they're still very, very conservative people. When you're fighting for the existence of your culture, that's a conservative thing to do, right? And that's not all they're fighting for. ISIS was selling all their women into sex slavery and killing all their men. So they're also fighting for just their existence as a whole. And so but these groups are Marxist. These militia groups that these guys basically have to join are Marxist groups. And so, as a part of joining the group, right? It's a militant group. It's literally a military group that is fighting for the existence of this, ethnicity of people. That's what the group is doing. They're literally trying to stop a genocide from happening, or from like fully happening, because the genocide was already happening. But in order to join these groups, they have to go through like an ideological training that I'm sure includes Marxism, but also the other thing it includes is like feminism, and not super hardcore feminism. Like honestly pretty tame feminism, I'd say. It's not I do live in America, so I kind of get the extremes of all of these ideologies, especially the liberal ones. So I've been exposed to maybe more radical feminism, but this to me seemed like a fairly tame form of feminism where it was like just men and women are equal and that's the whole thing, right? Which is the truth, but also when you're talking to a group of dudes who herd goats in the mountains, you got to start at like you can't go that extreme. Like that's too extreme for these guys to be hearing about. They're going to instantly reject the idea. But the documentary showed these the Kurdish military recruits in this like room, and they were doing like the traditional Middle Eastern thing. They were all sitting crisscross applesauce on some rugs or whatever. And there was this lady there. And the lady was like lecturing them about feminism and all that stuff. And these dudes were doing like that, like scratching your forehead, like, yeah, I guess so. Like, and they all had like 1,000 yard. They weren't looking at her. They weren't looking at each other. They were just like, dude, if I have to listen to a bitch talk about, how I can't keep them in the house all the time in order to prevent a genocide from happening, then I guess I have to. But all these dudes were in this room, just like this mud hut, just like scratching their heads, being like, fuck, yeah, I guess. I guess. But they weren't even talking. It was literally like, it's just like one of those classes in high school or whatever. And I guess college has those types of classes too, where you're just like, yeah, I just got to make it through this one. It's not that I hate it or that I love it or whatever. It's just I guess I have to be here in, speech and communications class or whatever. That's what that class was like for me. It was just like I guess I can give a speech in front of a it doesn't bother me to do it, but like it is kind of bullshit and I don't want to be here, but I don't want to be here so bad that I'm gonna, start my own militia group. And so that was just so fucking funny to me that these guys who had seen like the horrors of war, that had seen, their family members or like members of this historically oppressed ethnicity being sold into sex slavery and like being executed and tortured and all that stuff. They'd seen all that. But then they go into this classroom where this lady's just like talking about feminism, not even a classroom, just like a room. And she's just sitting there talking about feminism and they're all like, yeah, and a few dudes were writing down notes, and it was like, I know that move. I know that move when you're writing down notes so that the professor doesn't call on you. I know that fucking move. And that's like a few of the guys were doing that, and the rest were just like holding their pens, when you put like your pens between your finger and you just like you put your hand on your forehead and you're just like, yep, I'm listening. They're about to go fight ISIS, and this is the worst part of their day. Just having to listen to this stuff. And like I said, it wasn't extreme. It wasn't radical. It was fairly, uh, I guess, normal. But in the other funny thing about it, so this lady was like, men don't know how much women have suffered. It's like, it's literally ISIS's game plan when they go into this Kurdish community is kill all the dudes. That's that's their game plan. And I'm sure they've killed many, many women and they do rape the women and sell them into slavery and all that stuff, right? They do all that for sure. And that's very horrible what they're doing. But like a main part of their game plan is going into like these villages or towns or whatever and just like lining up dudes and shooting them in the head. And this girl's like, you don't know how much women have suffered. It's like it's just, and they did suffer. Probably more so if you, I guess, want to put it in terms of like living suffering. But the reason the dudes haven't suffered as much as the women have is because they were killed. they did not they did not have the opportunity to suffer like these young Kurdish women did. They were forced out of suffering by being shot in the fucking head. So it's just like I can't imagine being a dude in that room, because you'll hear stuff like that now, where women are like, we're still oppressed and we still don't have anything going for us, and you're just like, yep, 100% you don't. So sorry your life sucks so much, and sorry mine is so great, I guess. Like that's what those dudes. I've never, these are hard ass tough fucking dudes who really believe in their culture and their ethnicity, and they believe in it in their core, and they believe that they should continue to be allowed to practice their culture, and I also believe in that, for myself and for them. But other than that, these dudes are pretty unrelatable to me. They're incredibly tough, they're incredibly hard-willed, they're willing to put their lives down at risk to fight the enemy. But in that moment of just hearing a woman talk about, how important feminism is or whatever, meanwhile dudes are getting like slaughtered in the streets and just sitting there and being like, mm-hmm, yeah, okay, I got it. And so then obviously a lot of these militant groups have a lot of women in them, and the way the documentary opens is it shows like this group of Kurdish fighters getting ready to go out and fight ISIS. And the opening shot is just like a few of the dudes are like smoking cigarettes, like mumbling to each other, and then you just hear and it's just like women like talking loud as shit and being like and the dudes are just like you could tell they're kind of annoyed. Like this one chick goes up to this one dude and she says some, I don't know, she's like, "You ready to fight or whatever?" And he goes, "Yeah, yeah, for sure." And just and look, these women are great women. They're better men than I am, and they're women. So I'm not like talking shit about them. It's just very funny to see these dudes who are so used to like just being in their dude spaces. And then all of a sudden, some chick with an AK-47 is like, "Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah." Like, I don't, the women are fighting, which is good, but it's still very funny for these dudes being like, I'm gonna go join the military, and it's gonna be me and my bros just chilling, drinking tea and smoking cigarettes together, shooting ISIS in the head. And then you just gotta hear out of you wake up in the barracks and some new female recruits walk in, and you just "Allahumma and malakhalalaga Allahumma," you know. And I really, sorry, I had a roommate scare there for a second, but like I said, I really felt what these dudes were going through, and I was just like, yeah, I get it. It's like I was in the Boy Scouts when I was younger, and then as soon as I was starting to get out, they started letting women in, and I was just like, these poor dudes, these poor young, tenderfoots or whatever. They don't know what they're going through. They don't know what's about to fucking happen to her. And that was the end of it. That was the end of the Boy Scouts. And also the end of the Boy Scouts was like the mass molestation of young men in several other things, but bankruptcy, all that stuff. I do think they still exist, but it was the end of it, like as we know it, which, I'm sure every generation has their thing like that where it's like, oh, this is the end of it. And then the thing like keeps persisting, but in a changed form. Um, yeah, I just felt so bad for this. It's like those dudes are probably ready to go out on like the bro adventure of a lifetime. And then they just have to hear, no offense, the shrill squawking of Middle Eastern women as they're like getting their AK prep to go out and go and like fight ISIS to the death. And I've been watching a lot of ISIS stuff lately, and I watched this documentary about Abdu Bakr al-Baghdadi or Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, and I guess that's not his real name, right? He changed his name for some reason. religious, or I guess he just wanted a sicker sounding name, but apparently al-Baghdadi means like father of the camel or something like that, which is also hilarious. It's hilarious that like the leader and like the founder of the most ruthless um Islamic terrorist group of modern times, at least, his his name was the father of the camel, and they were the worst. Even Al Qaeda was like, "All right, bro, you guys gotta chill out." And maybe that was just because Al Qaeda, was getting their directive from the CIA or whatever. But yeah, no, ISIS was, it still is. There still is some ISIS shit going on, but yeah, those are some bad dudes. Controversial opinion here. ISIS is bad. But we're not here to talk about ISIS. We're here to talk about the assassination of Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar. What was going on for him or with him? Why did they kill him? What exactly was? Did they just hate him? Did they just hate his swag? Did they just hate the fact that he had, one of the sickest Roman names of all time, Julius Caesar? A name so iconic, it transcends, the language, right? Like the Russian Tsar. You've heard of like Tsar Nicholas or whatever. That Tsar means it's the Russian version of Caesar. And I think as well, Caesar became a title in ancient Rome. It wasn't originally, but this dude, we talked about Julius Caesar before, and we're not going to be talking about his battles or anything. We're just going to be talking about, like, I guess, the political situation. And the political situation isn't, it's not as complicated as these modern political situations where it's like this person's getting money from this person, but also from this person. And what that means is blah, 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 blah. No, this is pretty, it's basic. It's nice and basic, and I really like that. But we did talk about, Julius Caesar single-handedly like doubling the size of the Roman Empire, or I guess Republic, by conquering Gaul by himself, fighting Vercingetorix at Elysius, and he had so few men that his line was only one person deep, and Vercingetorix almost broke through, but then Julius Caesar came in with his flowing red cape and saved the day. The guy's sick. He's one of the sickest people of all time. And the people of the Roman Republic at that time, they also agreed with him. They were like, this dude is very, very sick. They thought he was sick as hell. Some people didn't think he was so sick, and that's why they stabbed him a whole bunch of times. But why did they do that? Why exactly was it? Was it just because the Roman people thought he was sick as shit? Or was it for some other reasons? Maybe for some more selfish reasons? Well, we're gonna find out today. We're gonna find out what's going on with our boy Julius Caesar. So we're gonna talk about the build up, the plan, and then the actual getting the business done. So the buildup. After serving the Republic for 8 years and conquering Gaul, Caesar was told by the Senate to disband his army. Which, yeah, I wouldn't have listened to that either. Spoiler alert, he doesn't listen to that. And that's one of the reasons why the senators hate him so much, because he was just like, no, right? Obviously, I just doubled the size of the empire. And now you're going to tell me to disband the army that did that, right? And then I have no more power. And obviously, Caesar was he was a governor of, I think, two Roman like provinces or whatever. But still, for him to like disband his army, that's a pretty big hit to him. This guy, he's a military commander. It's it's what he did his entire career, and now you want to take it away from him. And the only reason they wanted to take it away from him was because he was just too powerful, and they knew he could conquer basically whoever he wanted by himself, or with his army. He didn't really need Rome anymore, and they wanted Caesar to need Rome, and so that's why they made him, or they tried to make him disband his army. So he chose not to, and instead crossed the Rubicon and started Caesar's civil war, which lasted from 49 to 44 BC, before Christ, all right, before the birth of Christ. I'm sick and tired of the BCE and CE stuff. Common era. No, it's not it's Christ. That's the reason these two periods in history exist. It's because of the birth of the very real, whether you think he's the Son of God or not, the very real and very influential Jesus Christ. So we're using BC here. And this is also where the phrase, which I guess is a real phrase, but I've never heard it before, is crossing the Rubicon. Because when Caesar marched his army across the Rubicon, which is a river, I think it's between Switzerland and Italy, something like that. But it's basically by doing that, he couldn't have gone back. He couldn't have gone back to like Gaul or whatever, territories he controlled at the time. He was going full force into Rome to, conquer him and show him what the fuck was up. So the Civil War is happening, and in 49 BC, or 44, sorry, Caesar was appointed dictator perpetuo, which means dictator in perpetuity, which just means forever, I think. When something is perpetual, it just keeps going on forever and ever. So I assume this means dictator, or maybe it just means for now, but he was the dictator. So, and this wasn't like we just have like this negative connotation of dictator now, but back in the day, it was like you might have preferred like a dictator over a king or something like that because at least a dictator was like actually chosen by someone, whereas a king is just like the son of the guy. So dictator back then, it wasn't like it is now, where it's like, oh, this guy's a military dictator, which technically Caesar was, but it, people wanted him to be a military dictator. They were like, Caesar's the fucking man. He went out and he conquered Gaul and all that shit by himself, and he conquered a whole bunch of other shit. Like he's the dude. We want Caesar here. So he became dictator perpetuo. So according to Titus Livius, there were three other events besides the war which led to Caesar's assassination. So I think the war is the big one. It's the war was the big one, but I think there was a few other things that happened after the war that were just like little pokes, because he won the war fair and square. He did. He marched into Rome, started this whole civil war, and then he won it. Which Rome is a pretty militaristic society, so I'd assume that for the most part people would appreciate something like that. They'd appreciate the fact that he was just like, fuck it, I'm crossing the Rubicon, I'm going in, I'm starting the Civil War, and then further than that, he won the war. But he did just a few other things that were like, went a little bit beyond that. It went a little bit beyond just like classic military conquest to like, what's this guy doing? Does he have some other plan that he's not telling us about? Is he just coming in here and conquering us, or is he trying to do some other shit? So the first occurred in 45 or 44 BC when the Senate marched to the temple of Venus Genetrix to bestow many honors upon Caesar. Um, Venus Genetrix, I guess, is like a temple to Venus or something like that, because all the temples are like the name of the god, right? Whether it's Minerva or like Jupiter, or I guess in this case, Venus. And then it has some afterwards. So I guess he was just chilling at this temple, which is pretty sick move. He was probably pulling a lot of pussy by doing that. So he's just chilling at this temple, and then they're like, originally they were just like, all right, we're gonna give Caesar all these honors, but then they were like, no, we gotta like make this formal and official and all this stuff, and go give Caesar his honors like to his face, which is, yeah, if you're dealing with Caesar, you kind of gotta kiss ass. This dude just came in and conquered one of the most powerful empire at the time. So I understand a little bit of ass kissing that's going on, but he was just chilling there, probably being like, I love Venus. Venus is my favorite god. So are we gonna do something after this? That's probably what Caesar was doing at Venus Genetrix. So when they arrived, Caesar refused to stand and said the honors needed to be cut back instead of increased, which, yeah, he was just like, I'm not getting up from my seat here. I got all these women around me feeding me olives and grapes and stuff and fanning me with palm fronds. The honors, whatever, man. I just came in here and showed you guys what for. Yeah, it's like he just defeated his enemy, and then the enemy is like trying to be like, oh, well, we're gonna give you all these honors, right? Which, if I was him, I would probably have the same reaction where it's like, oh, thank you so much. It was like, dude, I could have fucking destroyed you. I could have flattened your entire fucking thing that you had going on, but I spared you. You know what I mean? And now you're gonna bestow honors upon me. Oh wow, what great honor is it to fucking receive these gifts from a bunch of fucking people who I just beat in a goddamn war. So I kind of understand where he's coming from with this one, but this event showed that Caesar didn't care about or respect the Senate in any way, shape, or form. He literally did not give a fuck about them at all. He didn't care if he hated them. He didn't care if they liked them, right? Which I think is even worse. Because if you don't care when someone hates you, that's I think that's like a just like the natural response to that type of situation. But if you don't care when someone likes you, it means you hate that person. Or that, I guess, in this situation, this group of people. Or you just don't care about them at all. So, when you hate someone, you put that negative, or when someone hates you, you put that like sort of negative thing out and you just kind of forget about it. But when someone likes you and you still reject them, that means that you don't like them. So that's how human interactions work. See, there's like, nah, fuck off. I don't need your honors. I don't know if he fully rejected them, but he was basically just like, oh wow, honors from you guys? How fucking lucky am I? Thank you so much, senators, with your fucking togas and your olives and all that shit. I don't fucking need that stuff, dude. I just conquered France, which, I mean, if you look at just the history of France, not a difficult thing to do, but still, I just conquered France, and then you're coming and bringing me all these gifts. I don't give a fuck. I just conquered you too. So that was the first thing, rejected all these gifts. And then the second occurred when two tribunes, which a tribune um, is just like an individual person, right? You think tribune and you think like a military tribune or whatever, and like a group of people. This is just, we're talking about two individual people. And then I think the tribunal is like the collection of all the tribunes and all the whole thing they have going on. So two tribunes found a diadem, which is like a crown. It's more like a tiara than it is like a big old Charlemagne crown on a statue of Caesar and had it removed. Caesar suspected the two tribunes put it there so that they could remove it. Which at this point, I wouldn't put anything past these senators, dude, because Caesar's a military man. His whole life is based off like a meritocracy, basically. Where it's just like I go out, I prove what kind of man I am in the battlefield, and then I get respect. But these senators, they weasel their ways into like these fucking political positions. And so, like, they probably did do it, to be fucking fully honest with you. These guys, these politicians back then, they're no less sleazy than the politicians we have now. So he's like, I think you guys did that just so you could make a whole big deal out of removing this diadem from my head. And I don't think anyone was wearing crowns back then. I think crowns were just like a thing for like the gods and stuff like that, or like offerings to the gods. So I think kind of by putting a crown on Caesar's head, it was basically symbolizing that he was a god or divinely ordained or something like that. It wasn't just being like, oh, he's the king. It was like, this guy he's on par with the gods. So Caesar was getting a little upset at these guys at that point. I know you guys can fucking hear it. That is insane. It's insane how loud that thing is, and it just does it randomly with no. Some days it doesn't do it at all, and some days it's just. All right, whatever. And as soon as you think it's gone, it comes right back. So later, Caesar was riding on horseback when a plebe, which I guess is a non-Roman citizen, I didn't really look it up, but I think that's what it means. When a plebe cried out Rex, which means king, and Caesar responded, I am not Rex, but Caesar, which it wasn't a joke about him, or it wasn't a statement about him not being the king. It was a joke about his last name being not being Rex. And so the two tribunes had the man who said that arrested. So yeah, but by the way he responded to it, he wasn't being like, "Oh no, 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 I'm not the king." He was being like, "Oh well, my last name isn't Rex," which so he wasn't denying that he was the king. He was making a joke about how his last name wasn't Rex, basically saying, "I could be the king." Right? Is basically what Caesar was saying in this situation, according to some historians, or maybe he literally was just being like, no, I'm not I'm the Caesar, which Caesar might have been autistic like that. He might have like taken this thing seriously and just been like, "Oh, I'm not the king. I'm dictator perpetuo. I am not the king." because he was just so fucking good at being a military leader, and a lot of those guys are like Stonewall Jackson, autistic as shit. MacArthur, that guy was probably autistic as shit. A lot, Dwight D. Eisenhower was definitely fucking autistic and gay. So I think a lot of these guys are autistic, and I think Caesar, fucking Napoleon, 100%. And so I think Caesar was just, he might have just been too autistic and he wasn't actually making a joke. He was just being like, no, that's not my official title. Why are you calling me Rex? So Caesar then accused the tribunes, one of whom represented the plebes. I don't know what exactly he accused them of, but he accused them of some shit, removed, and he removed them from office, thus turning the public opinion against him. So one of the tribunes he removed was like a military tribune guy, so he represented the military, and obviously the military is not going to turn against fucking Julius Caesar. You know, like I said, guy went out and conquered Gaul by himself, an insane fucking feat. You know, it's like there's few generals in history, and it's like Julius Caesar, Napoleon, and then like a few other guys. But Julius Caesar is one of the main ones. He's one of the ones that just all, if you want to be like a great high level military leader, then Caesar's just one of those guys. Even if his tactics aren't necessarily useful to your tactics today, he's still just so fucking legendary. And so obviously the army of the military isn't going to turn against him, but by removing the, uh, I think one of the only uh, representatives of the plebes in Rome, they got pretty pissed at him. And there were a lot of plebes, right? Most people that lived in Rome weren't even citizens, and a lot, even more of those people were slaves. So, yeah, they were like the majority of the population was like, dude, you just took our representation away, basically. And so this kind of turned public opinion against him, but not not fully. Caesar just had something about him. The people just liked him. You know, obviously him being this great military leader, he knows how to like connect these people and motivate them and stuff like that. So turned against him a little bit, but not fully. So finally at the festival of Lupercalia, um, Mark Antony, and Lupercalia has something to do with February. Mark Antony put a diadem on Caesar's head, which received a small applause. Caesar removed it, and Mark Antony put it back on to the same response. And so Mark Antony, he was one of Caesar's top guys. You know, I'm Hitler's top guy. Mark Antony, he was he was Caesar's top guy. He was like his main general, like his biggest homeboy. You know, he was his friend and also just like this great tool or weapon that he had by his side as the dictator. So a little bit of glazing, a little bit of meat writing there, being like, "Oh, Caesar, you're so great. I have to put this crown on your head because you're so great." A little bit of dick writing, you know what I mean? He got the dick all in his mouth, but you know, and a small applause from the crowd, which that is also a big deal because it's like, dude, this guy's the fucking dictator and like the greatest military leader of all time. But once again, you got to remember, dictator doesn't mean the same thing really that it does now, you know, connotatively. So, but still, like a small applause from the crowd is that's kind of an indication, you know, because it's the people that are clapping, they might just be clapping because they don't want to like be executed or whatever by Caesar or arrested or whatever. So yeah, that's kind of a big deal. But he, after the second time that Mark Antony put it on, Caesar took off the crown and put it aside to use as a sacrifice to Jupiter and said, "Jupiter alone is the king of Rome," which drew a massive applause from the crowd. That as soon as you think he's gone, you know, he took the plebes' representation away in the Senate, you know, which made him really upset. And then he's like, fucking Jupiter is sick as shit, dude. I fucking love Jupiter. I'd never betray him like that. I'd never try to be the king. Jupiter is the king. He's the man. And the crowd was like, fuck, let's go. You know, which there is like a modern equivalent of that. It when like the you know, with Trump pretending to be a Christian and like a lot of these, I guess, MAGA Republicans pretending to be Christians and all that stuff, that is, we do we can draw parallels between the two things, right? Where it's like, you really think Trump is a fucking Christian, dude. The guy's been divorced 3 times, and he cheated on his pregnant wife with a fucking porn star. Right? To be fair, Paul also, who was one of the apostles, he was going out and cutting off Christians' head, but I don't think Donald Trump has like the conviction and the humility to become a real Christian like that, right? And he's also like signing the Bible, which I'm pretty sure is sacrilegious as shit. I'm pretty sure that's an insane level of blasphemy on par with just like being a Protestant. But look, not the point here. Not the point. I'm not here to criticize Protestantism. Um, but I also don't like it. But whatever. Caesar was like, God, he was basically like, God is sick as shit. And obviously, all the people were like, fuck yeah, let's go. I love God. Right? And so many saw this as Caesar testing the waters to see if there was enough support for him to become king. So they think he was like he was like, hey, yo, Mark Antony, put this crown on my head, and then we'll see if the people love it and they clap a whole bunch, then we're just gonna run this shit and I'm gonna become the king of Rome. Right? But when the crowd didn't have that much applause, he was like, fuck, I gotta figure out a way out of this. The whole situation didn't really work out for me. I'm just gonna say God is sick as shit and say, I'll never be God, and then the whole crowd is gonna lose their mind. Which he didn't even need to go that far, dude. I feel like Trump it, has put himself on par with like Jesus multiple times. So he didn't even need to, Caesar didn't even need to say that God was sick as shit. He just needed to be like, yep, I love God. That's all he needed to say. But no, he didn't. He humbled himself a little bit and he was like, I'll never be the king. This crown is for Jupiter. I'm going to go sacrifice it to him later. He's the true king of Rome. So, got the people back on his side with that. Great, great leader. At least militaristically, we don't, spoiler alert, we don't get to see him a whole bunch as like a national political leader, but a great military leader. And he was a political leader. He was the governor of those 2 little areas in Rome or whatever. So we just never got to see him as king, man. And I think maybe he was supposed to be king, which we'll talk about later. So the final event took place in February of 44 BC, and that is also when the conspiracy to kill him was born. So what's this called? The Festival of Lupercalia, however you say it, uh, that takes place on February 15th, and then the conspiracy to kill him starts on February 22nd. So, God, I mean, they just did him fucking dirty, man. They did him so dirty. The boy got like a week after, and he just had like this great victory where he defeated the most powerful empire at the time. I mean, you know, if the guy wanted to become king, he would have kind of done it already, and that's not even that crazy of an idea. You know, dictator perpetuito or whatever it was called. That's basically already king. It just doesn't have like the bloodline aspect to it, which, no, Caesar did have kids, but he was basically already the king. But they were just like, no, we can't give him the official title as king because I do think even back then that linked him to the gods and Jupiter and all that stuff and kind of related him to the religion and like imbued him and the religion as one and the same. And so therefore, the public was just going to support him more and more and more. So I think that's why they didn't want him to become king, even though he basically already was the king. Right? And so then the conspiracy starts. What's going on with the conspiracy? We know one of the guys. There's that big famous quote that everyone knows, which we'll talk about. But oh, who else was in on this? Who else? Turns out a lot of fucking people. A lot of people really did not want Caesar to become the king, but it wasn't even, not all of them were like overly concerned with him becoming like this brutal ruler or whatever. They were more concerned about losing power, or they just had personal vendettas against Caesar. So the Roman poet Virgil wrote a story describing the terrifying omens regarding Caesar's death. So there's this whole big thing that he wrote out, and it's kind of like a metaphor of being like, when Caesar was killed, the sky turned gray and all that stuff, and we knew shit was gonna be fucked up after Caesar was killed, right? And he also wrote about omens like forewarning Caesar of his death and all that stuff. And it's not like literal, right? I think we look at a lot of these old historical things and we're like, oh, they actually think that, a raven came down and like talked to a dude or whatever. When in reality, it's the same as our stories now. It's a metaphor for something else, right? Like Apocalypse Now. People are like, oh, well, Apocalypse Now isn't historically accurate, and it's like that's not the point of the movie, right? That's not the point of, you know, Virgil's poem. It's not supposed to be like a literal representation of what happened. It's supposed to be, you know, it's just reflective of the whole thing. It's supposed to be like a representation of the thing, if that makes sense, and not like a literal representation, but a more artistic, symbolic representation of it. So, on February 22nd, like I said, Cassius Longinus met his brother-in-law. Who do you think his brother-in-law was, dude? Who do you think one of the main dudes, not one of the main dudes, the main dude in like planning this whole plot, who do you think it was? Who do you think was Cassius Longinus' brother-in-law? It was Marcus Brutus. Brutus. And they decided uh, something had to be done to prevent Caesar from becoming king. Something had to be done. Obviously, it's a secret conspiracy, and these guys are pussies. That's the honest truth of it. They're pussies, and they know they're not gonna beat Caesar on even ground. They know they're not gonna turn the public against him because as soon as they tried doing that, he fucking turned it right back around on him. They know they can't beat him fair and square. And so obviously the only option left is an assassination. It's the only thing they can do to stop Caesar. They literally have to stab him in the back. Fucking, make him think that they're good people who he can trust and then fucking kill him. That's literally all you can do to stop Caesar at this point. That is how great he is as a military leader, as a political leader, as a populist, as all that stuff. Caesar's the best at it. And these guys know even if they combine forces, even if the entire Senate combined forces to stop Caesar militarily or politically, they still wouldn't be able to do it because he's just one of the best at doing it ever. Just at being a human. Like Caesar's just one of the best people, and not maybe morally at being a human. I don't know, maybe he was, but I don't know. I think he probably no, he enslaved like millions of Gauls, but um, just in terms of like human success, Caesar is one of the best people. He just bathes in success. He's so successful at success. And there's no one really more successful than Caesar. Maybe a few people here and there, but I mean, just no one's like it. It's Rome, the most objectively powerful, military and political force that existed up until this time, and he fucking conquered it with his army, with his own private army, as the general. He wasn't just like, okay, army, go do that. No, he was the general. He was the leader of this fucking army, and he conquered Rome, basically. He conquered Rome with Romans, but still, it's very, very impressive. It would like, if some army general was like, all right, now I'm going to take over America. That's basically what Julius Caesar did. And not only am I going to take over America, it's going to be incredibly popular and everyone's going to love me for taking over America. It's basically what Caesar did at this point. It, and he did it well. Like, no one can deny it. Yeah, he fired the tribune of the plebes. And then he fucking turned it right back around and they were calling him king. You can't stop the guy. He's too fucking good at what he does. So the two Cassius and Longinus, or not Cassius and Longinus, Longinus and Brutus began to recruit others in an attempt to legitimize the assassination as the removal of a tyrant for the sake of Rome. So they were just trying to make it look like this was the removal of a tyrant. They knew that Caesar wasn't actually that bad for Rome, right? He might not have been the perfect, ideal leader for Rome, but he wasn't that bad. They knew he wasn't going to run it into the ground or anything like that. They knew he didn't respect the Senate and obviously their senators. And so they're going to be like, well, now we have to get Caesar out of the way. because if he's not going to listen to us, then we're not going to have any power and we're not going to be able to make money and we're not going to be able to do all that stuff. And you might be thinking to yourself, are these people really willing to kill this insanely popular leader just to have like a few more, gold coins or whatever? Yes, they will, dude. Yes, they will. People people still do shit like that, right? Like that's the whole Epstein Island conspiracy. And some people will dismiss Epstein as being like, oh well, would someone really like sell out their country just to like keep this blackmail private? Would people really sell out their country just to, make a few million bucks from these super PACs that are funded by these military industrial companies? Yes, they would, right? We can look at the historical context of seeing these senators who are willing to kill Caesar and prevent, this great leader for Rome. Imagine if Caesar had been in charge of the entire army of Rome. They would have conquered fucking Rome might still be a country if they never killed Caesar. Like seriously. The reason Rome fell is because they they didn't really have a lot of protection on like the whole Germanic area of things, right? That's one of the main reasons why Rome fell. And also because, the leaders weren't a whole bunch of reasons, but one of the main reasons is because they didn't conquer enough territory in a certain area, and that was like their weak spot. But if they had Caesar, Caesar probably would have been able to conquer that territory, and Rome might still be a thing. So they literally sold out the future of their country for a few gold coins. That's seriously what they did. So if you think, our modern senators won't do the same thing, you're out of your goddamn mind. You're stupid. So yeah, I don't know. That's just me defending my insane conspiracy theory ideas that I have, which aren't even that crazy, dude. They were crazy like 2 years ago, and then everyone was like, "Oh yeah, shit, that's probably true." It's probably true. Most of it is probably true. So, um, they're trying to these dudes that are doing the plan. They're trying to fucking get all these people on their side to make it seem like a legitimate thing. Mm, we got a few things going on like that now, where it's like if I can get enough of these senators on my side, then maybe the American people will think that I'm a legitimate country and that my war is legitimate. Remind you of a few things. Anyway, so the men decided they needed enough men to overwhelm Caesar's supporters, and he had a lot of them. He was very popular, but not so many that they would get caught. They recruited friends and approached them with innocent sounding questions, eventually amassing 60 to 80 men, although the whole 80 men thing might have been just a clerical error. Obviously, 6 and 8 look pretty similar to each other. 6, 7, but they got 60 to 80 men amassed to take out Caesar at, obviously, everyone knows, a Senate meeting, a meeting of the Senate. They got to take out our boy Caesar because he's too good. They're literally haters. That's all that it is. It has nothing to do with the political situation or, the fear that their country is going to collapse or whatever. They're literally just haters. They're just like, no, I don't like Caesar. He's not cool. Caesar's gonna take away all my gold coins and my olives and my toga from me. Oh. Um, and yeah, that's literally the whole thing, is that they're just trying to take Caesar out because they want to stay in power. And so they get all these men to be like, to try to make it seem like the senators are, fighting for the rights of the people or whatever. Just did him so dirty. They're just haters, man. It's so sad to see. I'm sure if they just approached Caesar and they were like, dude, Caesar, we know you want to be king. We'll make you king, but you got to give us a few gold coins. If they just did that, that probably would have worked out fine for him. Caesar, he was a smart guy. He understood all of this stuff. So I think if they just did that, then it would have worked out really well for them. we we just had two um I guess interruptions back to back, although not really interruptions, but still. Um so yeah, back to what I was talking about. So they got all these dudes together and some of the men debated killing Caesar's top general, his main boy Mark Antony, but Brutus argued against this, saying it was unjust. So, which is just, it wasn't unjust to kill Mark Antony, right? Because if it's just to kill Caesar, then why wouldn't it be just to kill Mark Antony, like his main boy, his main supporter, and all that stuff? Um, you know, for what they're trying to do, you have to kill Mark Antony too. It wasn't about justice. It was they were scared of Caesar. They were scared of Caesar taking their power away, and I think they knew that if they tried to kill Caesar and Mark Antony together, it would have been impossible because they're both these great military leaders, and these guys are just like shitty fucking senators. And so I think they thought they just couldn't take him out at the same time. Their swag was too tough. They were getting too many bitches. Their fits were too hard. Caesar's fit was literally too hard. He like wore his toga in a special way that like everyone else copied. These were just two swagged out ass white boys, and the rest of the senators were too scared to try to kill them both at once. So the group ultimately decided to kill Caesar at the Ides of March, which is a Senate meeting, believing that an ambush in a secluded area would be received poorly by the public. Do I get some bad news for you guys? Do I have some awful news for you guys? But I guess the Ides of March is just one of their Senate meetings that they hold together. And they were like, we're going to kill him there. Because I think they were like, if we kill him at this whole big Senate meeting, then people will be like, oh, well, the entire Senate hated Julius Caesar. So therefore, we should hate Julius Caesar too, because these senators are supposed to represent our interests. So I'm pretty sure that's what was going through the conspirators' heads when they were deciding when and where to kill Caesar, and also the Ides of March, I don't know, something about it. It's just a very beautiful name, or poetic at the very least. So I think they made the right choice in that regard, like Ides of March. Isn't there just something like romantic, not like, sexually romantic or whatever, but like, just it sounds like it would be in a Shakespeare play or something like that. Like, it sounds like the name of a Shakespeare play, the Ides of March. So I mean, good choice there. And they were like, if we just jump this dude in the middle of the woods and kill him there, then he's going to be seen as like a martyr or something like that. So Caesar was warned he would be in danger no sooner than the Ides of March, and he was worried about Cassius. There was this one Senate meeting, or I guess like partial Senate meeting or something like that, where Caesar saw Cassius and Brutus talking together, and he like turned to Mark Antony and he's like, dude, what's wrong with Cassius? He looks pale. He looks like sickly pale. I don't like the way he's looking right now, which is very funny. Just roasting the shit out of that guy. He did not give a fuck. Caesar was sick as shit. And these guys decided to kill him at the Senate meeting, and we're going to find out the whole Senate, they didn't hate Caesar like these guys did. And a lot of the guys that they got on their side were people who like wanted to grab power from Caesar. They were like, they wanted Caesar's power. Once again, it's not about, preventing an evil tyrant from taking over Rome. It's about preventing this guy who has more power than you from taking your power from you. And some of the guys were like former military leaders under Caesar and stuff like that, and they felt like Caesar had like looked them over or didn't give them enough money for when they conquered a certain area. But they were just haters. They just couldn't accept Caesar and Mark Antony's swag. They just had too much swag, and everyone hated them for it. So now we're on to the Ides of March. So, due to construction at the Roman Forum, senators were meeting at several venues throughout Rome. And also, I think it's important to note that the renovations being done at the Roman Forum were funded by Caesar. He was literally paying these dudes to get some new sick-ass digs, and they were like, let's fucking kill this guy. Because they couldn't accept the fact that he was just sicker than him. That he was just a better fucking leader than all of them were. They could not accept that fact. Even as he's like building them a new place to meet, they're still like, we gotta fucking kill this guy. So they're meeting at a few smaller venues throughout Rome. The city of Rome, not not the entire fucking country, but throughout like the main city of Rome. They're meeting up there, talking about the Ides of March, I guess. I don't know exactly what that means. And I think if I did know what it meant, it would take some of its, beauty or poetic nature away from it. So Caesar, the conspirators, and some non-conspirators would meet at the theater of Pompey where gladiators were fighting and stationed. These men would be useful to the conspirators if things went wrong. Once again, we have a prime example of the conspirators being giant pussies. You're literally 60 dudes trying to kill one guy. And that one guy is so sick and he has so many people on his side that you're like, fuck it. We need armed gladiators maybe to come defend us when we're trying to kill Caesar. That's how sick he was. They literally needed like a small army to take out one dude. One dude. And they needed all these fucking people to take him out. And I guess they knew the guy who owned the gladiators because they were slaves. And so they were like, we know these gladiators are going to be on our side. Although maybe they might not have been. They might not have been on their side because Caesar was a populist. People were calling him king even though he wasn't the king. He had swag and everyone knew it. So Caesar originally decided not to go to the meeting after his wife dreamed he was murdered, but he was persuaded by one of the conspirators. So his wife had this dream where she was holding Caesar after he had been murdered, and he sent Mark Antony to go be like, just tell the senators we're not meeting, or whatever. And then one of the conspirators came to his house and was like, oh, Caesar, please. Caesar, like literally like a fucking like an evil advisor to the king, like stroking his beard, being like, oh, king, you must listen to me. Like literally that level of fucking bitch-ass snake behavior came to Caesar's house being like, please, Caesar, please will you meet with us? Just taking advantage of the guy's mercy and his, emotions and all that stuff. Piece of shit behavior. And also the one time a girl's dream has ever been useful. Usually a girl dream is like... the most nonsensical bullshit you've ever heard in your life. But this one wasn't. This was a real, like I said earlier, maybe Caesar wasn't, I think he was that guy. And I think, even though he wasn't a Christian, God still was like, Caesar's that guy, dude. I gotta send this lady a dream to try to keep Caesar alive. That's how sick he was. Even God was like, dude, it would be so much sicker if Caesar was in charge of Rome. So he sent his wife this dream or whatever. Although maybe not. Maybe it was just a random dream. And maybe there was like a general air that the senators and all that stuff didn't like Caesar and that they were going to eventually turn on him. But Caesar, obviously, he didn't know to that extreme that these dudes were trying to take him out of the game. So while entering, Caesar called to the seer who warned him, saying, the Ides of March have come. And the seer responded, the Ides have come, but they are not done yet. God damn it, Caesar, no! Caesar! I feel like fucking Matthew McConaughey when he went into that black hole and he was banging on the bookshelf being like, no, don't let me leave, Murph. That's what I'm feeling like Caesar, watching Caesar walk in and having this, oracle or whatever warn him, being like, the Ides of March have come, but they ain't over yet. God, did him so dirty, man. He's just walking in here, saluting his boy. This guy's a seer. He's an oracle. Caesar doesn't have to show him that much respect, but he did. Saluted him, said, what's up, dog? How's it going, big man? You were wrong. Hey, buddy, you were wrong about this shit. And the seer is just like, the day has not yet passed, dude. The sun hasn't set. It's still not over yet. It ain't over. God damn it, Caesar, why are you doing this to me? So... it was also upon entering, like I said, when Mark Antony was discreetly detained. They grabbed Mark Antony, I guess he was walking behind Caesar, and one dude grabbed him, and they detained him outside of the theater of Pompey, and they were just like, wait here. And then after he knew that Caesar was dead, Mark Antony just hit the fucking wheels, and he sprinted out of there. And so before Caesar he sat down and he was presented with a petition. I guess the petition was to bring someone's cousin or relative or something like that back into Rome. And they were like, oh, Caesar, please sign this petition. Please, Caesar, oh, we need you to sign this petition. Once again, playing on the man's emotion. So supporters of the petition surrounded Caesar before one pulled off his toga and all of them attacked. So one dude, and this is how much aura Caesar had. One dude tried to stab Caesar in the neck, and he hit like a fucking Matrix-style dodge, and like the knife just like kind of cut him, but didn't really cut him. And then the dude like grabbed him by his toga, or no, he was grabbed by his toga. Then the guy tries to hit him with the knife. Caesar fucking goes Super Saiyan mode, avoids the knife, and then they all just jumped him, with their knives and attacked him. So he was stabbed 23 times. His last words were the Greek phrase Kai Sweet Kanon, meaning you too, child. So the famous quote is "Et tu, Brute," which means you too, Brutus. In actuality, it was "you too, child," which means the same thing. He was like, Brutus, what do you do? And I was so mad that I couldn't, try to see why Caesar and Brutus were boys. I was so pissed off at Brutus at this point that I was just like, I don't want to know, Brutus. You know what, Brutus? I don't want to fucking know about how friendly you and Caesar were. Because you're pissing me off with this bullshit, dude. Killing the guy, playing on his emotions, fucking torturing him like that, betraying him. You did him so dirty. And this is even more sad. So he said nothing to Brutus, right? Brutus was he was the main plotter of this attack, the main conspirator of it. And he saw Brutus and he just pulled his toga over his head when he was being stabbed to death. And he made a pretty fucking he did good, Caesar, once again, being the beast that he is, he did a pretty decent job against these guys. So they're like stabbing him and stuff like that. According to the doctor who examined Caesar, only 2 of the stabs were like fatal off rip. There was like one in the lung and one in his leg that were like insta-kill stabs. The rest was just like these little bitch-ass things because these fucking senators, they're not military men like Caesar and Mark Antony. They don't know how to fucking fight like that. And so they barely got him. Even with like 60 to 80 dudes, these guys barely got Caesar. And he was able to like fight through the crowd, so he didn't die in the chair. He like died at like the steps of the theater because he was so sick. Even with 80 dudes attacking him with knives, he was able to fucking escape. Because he's just a beast. And he only got stabbed 23 times. Because he's a goddamn animal. Alright, so they stabbed Caesar to death. And the Senate erected a wax statue showing Caesar's stab wounds. And in response, the populace burned the Senate house. Which is just, even in death, they're like, oh, look at your grand Caesar now. We're going to make a statue of him. And we're going to show you where we stabbed him and all that stuff. And the people were like, well, how are you going to feel without a fucking place to meet now? They were so goddamn mad. Caesar was the man. All the populace knew it. Even the Senate, I would say, knew how much of a sick-ass dude Caesar was. And they just decided to end it because they couldn't handle his swag. So this was the end, actually, of the Roman Republic, as many people saw the assassination as the aristocratic Senate universally deciding the fate of Rome. So you've heard about Rome the Kingdom, Rome the Republic, and Rome the Empire. This is the end of the Roman Republic because Caesar was very popular among the people, and the people were like, you just fucking decided that this guy isn't our leader anymore. I wish the American people were like that because those motherfuckers, although they didn't know at the time, they killed JFK. The CIA, in collaboration with many other people, killed JFK. And we still haven't overthrown the government yet. And these dudes, and Mark Antony, like I said, they should have killed him. If they really didn't want Rome to have a king, they should not have killed Mark Antony because he was one of the main guys who transitioned the Republic to a monarchy empire, right? Like a bloodline descending empire. He was one of the main guys who did that. I'm just so goddamn mad. I am so fucking mad. Dude, imagine what Rome could have been if they never killed Caesar. Maybe it would have fell, or maybe it would still be a country. We do not know. And we never will know, because these fucking pussies decided that they couldn't handle Caesar's greatness, and they decided to kill him. It is sad. It is sad what they did to our boy, and I won't stand for it. Yeah, it's all I've got for this episode, guys. I'm just gonna go cry into my pillow, just thinking about how Caesar got killed. But I hope you have a good day, a good week, a good year, a good life, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace.